Bled like one of the leaders for this?
Yeah. Hey, everybody. It's Dr. Lauren Castle, Dr. Marina Booksov, and me, Kevin, in the Functional Med and Herbalism show. But we've got some really exciting stuff happening in pharmacy. Exciting in some ways, but just news in other ways. Let's talk about that a little bit of the pharmacy walkouts and what's kind of happening there. We'll do a little bit of an herbalism and functional medicine spin on what's happening, and we'll get right back after this reel. Hey, everybody. So good to see you guys. I know you guys are getting pulled in a bunch of different directions, and it seems like the pharmacy world really is too. We talked about like, hey, what do we talk about this morning? It was funny. Lauren just jumped right in and said, we have to talk about the walkouts. And literally all week, I thought, that's all I'm going to talk about on Thursday on every show, or the walkouts, because they matter, on what's happening inside of our profession. Lauren, I feel like you're probably the most tapped in of the crew. I'd love to do some announcements and things on this one, but I think we're going to have a really packed show. So if you want to, we can just jump right in, lay kind of the groundwork of what's happening for us, if you would.
Yeah. So if you haven't been on social media for the past week and aren't aware, as of yesterday, the CVS pharmacists over in the Kansas City area had their walkout, and there's more being planned. So now I've just recently seen that Walgreens is talking about doing one. So in my opinion, it's time. And, I was reflecting on this on my own LinkedIn account this week that, I feel so blessed and fortunate to be an entrepreneur now. I don't have a chain pharmacy that I would have to walk out of today, but I can honestly say that if I was still employed, I would have been walking out, even though I loved my own employer and I loved being in community pharmacy. This isn't about just, one person or one store or one market. This is about the entire industry of retail pharmacy and forcing a change. We've been talking about this for years and seeing rumblings and rumors and so many different attempts to try and shift the profession in a peaceful and positive way. And unfortunately, it hasn't changed. And so I'm just so inspired this week by all of the pharmacists who were brave enough to do this, because it's scary, right? Like, it's scary to think about losing your job over trying to change something you believe in, but it's time. And there's patients that, may be impacted by this week, but the longer term is so much scarier if we wouldn't be facing this head on, right? Because we all know of, patients that have been impacted through medication errors and pharmacists that have lost sleep at the very least, and more likely have become clinically depressed and anxious and had their own health suffer because of the working conditions. So it's not enough for companies to just sit back and say, well, here we have free hotlines you can call, and we have mental health resources you can use, and we have, all of these things. Those are great, but they don't work when you don't change the working conditions. And so I just, again, think it's so important that we keep talking about this. Like, yeah, if it's on every single RPH Ally show this week, good, because we need every single person's voice contributing to this conversation.
Yeah, I think those are some powerful words there, Lauren. And I want to pass it off to Marina to see if you have any thoughts there on what Lauren kind of laid out. I know that you have been gone and getting pulled in lots of directions, Marina, but any initial thoughts on kind of what's happening there, and then, what's kind of led up to things that are currently happening?
Yeah, I'm really proud of pharmacists as well. To piggyback off Lauren's conversation, I come from the retail setting, but on the independent side of it. And the reason is because I knew that I would hate the chain side of things. From my pharmacy school rotation experiences, it was really clear to me that the conditions there are inhumane, to put it mildly. So I didn't even attempt to get any job in that setting, even though I love community pharmacy, right? I love the patient interaction and education and counseling. And I think a lot of the pharmacists that go into those settings will tell you the same thing. When it turns into like just becoming billing experts and just getting paid by prescription, right? And all the metrics that have to be met, that's not necessarily what we signed up for and what we went to school to become doctors of pharmacy for. So I do applaud everybody who is contributing to this movement. And we've been talking about it for probably decades at this point about the unsafe working conditions. And now with extra responsibilities with vaccines, not to mention the new vaccine and the craze and the pandemic, but just the vaccination status, which I think we all were excited about too initially, because it gave us that provider side of things, which we were after for a while as well. But now it's like we're expected to do and handle and fulfill all these duties with less time and less resources. And that's just not what anybody signed up for.
Yeah, I think there's interestingly, like this has really been transpiring for a really long time. And interestingly, I think that once we started shifting into the PharmD setting, and Linda just commented here, I wanted to highlight her on there. And the idea of getting a job in retail caused me tremendous anxiety. And I think that's what I'm really getting to here, is that once the PharmD went in place and once we thought of ourselves as being doctors, right, or having some kind of clinical expertise, expectation of the job became, we're going to do things that are going to benefit patient lives. And when you go in, you have like that false hope ends up happening when you go into a setting that's not going to occur, because the incentives are not aligned for those businesses to do those things that you're being trained to do. And I think it's a really major call out. And I'm very thankful for folks like on our team, like Bled, that has led Pizzas Not Working for quite some time and continues to advocate for pharmacists. The incredible crew over at Would You Like Shots With That, and lots of folks that are stepping out and trying to say, like, we need to be able to emphasize the professionalism inside of pharmacy. I feel like Bruce Berger is another gentleman that always calls out, like, when are we going to put our foot down for professional integrity, right? When are we going to claim that we know what is best for our patients and this isn't it? And so I feel like those things are happening. But the one thing I guess I will say, not in defense of these major retailers, but just an acknowledgement, these are major retailers and major employers of our entire profession, right? And so I don't want them to go away. I don't want harm to be caused to them. Like they're creating job opportunities for our profession, and we need them to be successful to be able to make patients successful and our profession successful. And I think there is a huge amount of realignment that has to happen. And I'm really interested to hear your guys' thoughts on that. So what do you think, this is a start, this is really like shooting the flare up in the air, right? We're drawing the attention and we're trying to make a movement occur that has been transpiring for a bit. What do you guys think needs to happen next? I mean, we saw the apology that came out from CVS. A lot of people were disappointed pretty significantly by that verbiage, knowing that those individuals are held accountable by shareholders and jobs are on the line, et cetera. Like there's a lot of pressure to put those kinds of things out and word them and wordsmith them so everybody is happy. And so that's difficult. But what really needs to happen, Lauren? What do you think the next steps are for these major retailers and honestly for lawmakers so that we can get this right?
Yeah, gosh, what a question, right? And I wish I had all the answers. I don't think it's going to be any one thing. And that's what's so hard about this, right? Is that it's so multifaceted. So I get it too from a big company shareholder perspective, right? Like they can only do so much, all at once. But I think probably the most important thing to really consider is just the sheer magnitude of these companies to act like they aren't able to force a change quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, we're talking billions of dollars, right? Like the individuals that are at the top of these companies could single-handedly afford to help a pharmacist or a technician from a financial standpoint in their livelihood, right? So there's just a lot there to really unpack. Like the actual systematic changes that need to take place are challenging because one, in my personal opinion, right? We've been doing manual labor behind the counter in retail for entirely too long. We have technology that is able to physically fill prescriptions for us, that there truly is no need to have 5 or 6 technicians behind a counter and multiple pharmacists physically doing the act of dispensing drugs. The problem, though, is that we haven't shifted that model. We haven't shifted the expectations of patients or customers. And so it's very hard to just all of a sudden say like, oh, well now we're going to, implement some new technology to do this, right? Rolling out technology to 5,000 or 10,000 stores across a chain takes time. And so you really have to start with where you are, right? Like future state, yeah, pharmacies are not going to be staffed by pharmacists and technicians just filling drugs, right? You're going to have robots doing these things for us, as they should be. Any type of just purely manual tasks like that, there's no reason to not leverage technology to do those things. Even with AI, AI can counsel patients on basic drug information, right? AI can look at drug interactions. It's just that you need human oversight to some extent because there's always going to be a human component to these things that makes a difference. So, again, like, where do we go from here? I mean, I think it starts with just simply listening to the pharmacists and technicians in the stores that are actually doing the walkouts, right? And just doing exactly what they ask for. These pharmacists know more than anyone what they need in order to do their job safely and have the best insight into the path forward. So I think it's asinine that the companies won't simply say, yes, we're all ears and we're going to do it your way and actually try it, right? Because at the end of the day, they know what they need. Pharmacists are, again, highly educated individuals, right? We've gone to school for 6 years, we have doctorate degrees. If we say that we need this, this, and this in order for our pharmacy to function safely, that's what we need. And that's what these companies should be expected to provide the resources for their employees to do their jobs safely.
Love it. Marina, how about you? What are your thoughts on what are the next steps that we need to take?
Yeah, well, first of all, I completely agree with Lauren. And we've been talking on RPH Ally for a while about putting people over profits. So at the end of the day, like who is really benefiting from these unsafe working conditions and the metrics that are currently being pushed? We have to ask, like, whose side is management on, right? And what are the profit shares going to potentially benefit from if we're hurting and harming patients and our workers are, again, clinically depressed and anxious and feel like they can't do their job? And we're finding less and less people honestly able to tolerate these conditions, not even to the point of walking out and speaking up about it, but also quitting their jobs or looking for alternatives and shifting to other settings or starting their own businesses like me and Lauren have done. And now I'm able to be at home with my daughter as you're seeing her running around, right? And we do this for many, many reasons, but one of them being that the settings that there are job opportunities at, no matter how big the sign-up bonus or the shiny object, you're just not willing to sacrifice certain human rights to go and take that job. Despite the loans that you have, despite anything else, we as healthcare providers have to honor our own health and take care of our own mental health and really walk the walk, in my opinion. And frankly, I'm not sure, like the latest policies, maybe as far as like 5 to 10 years back with all the PBM reform and the chains buying themselves out and, becoming just less and less chains out there to create this competition and less independence. it really is turning into a monopoly to me, and even insurances, right? Different copays at different places. Like that has been unheard of before, and now that's possible. So for me, I think a lot of things have to change systemically. But first and foremost, I think public health measures and education, and starting from the ground up of the pillars of health. That's what we've been talking about in functional medicine and herbalism this whole time. That has to come first, and that will undercut all the costs and the need for pharmacy, which will allow us to actually provide care to those people that need it and prevent a lot of these illnesses and costs that we're dealing with.
This is an interesting tidbit here. That there's a Facebook user that just recently commented, said the expectations of the job have changed since I started practicing 25 years ago. And I do not think pharmacists were consulted in the change. I became a pharmacist because I did not want to be a nurse. I didn't want to touch people. I think that's the case for several pharmacists. That can be the case for many. I think there's a level of specialization that's kind of understood, like what are pharmacists? Like, what's our role? What's our point, right? And if there is no role, there is no point, then we'll continue to be gotten rid of in general. And I think being medication experts, being treatment experts is the role, right? There's the assumed role. The reimbursement for that role has not been related to that expertise. It's been related to margins, right? And so I think when you're looking at how are you developing companies, how are you moving forward, if it is margin based and you're continuing to extract more and more out of less and less, that's the strain, we're putting on it. It's a very like factory manufacturer based emphasis that you just want more productivity out of a single unit or widget. And those units and widgets end up being pharmacists and pharmacy technicians. And so the interesting piece for me is really this. I brought it up, I think, a few different times in our PHLI meetings, and I'm really curious to get your guys' thoughts on it, because I think when it comes to, what's the first step in general, like what the stress, the strain is really honing on this. I have more work than I am capable of doing safely, right, on my shoulders. Like if we just boil it down to the simplest component, that's it. And so what we have to be able to find out is the same thing that we've done in several different settings. And there's been strikes and issues with this in several settings. Nursing strikes oftentimes are the result of bed count, patient count. I am having to take care of too many people, and I am worried I'm going to hurt somebody. The exact same thing when I've worked with provider groups and large healthcare systems. These RVU expectations are ridiculous. I can't go in this direction any longer. That's the exact same thing for pharmacy, right? I mean, I've worked in telepharmacy settings where, the leadership inside of those companies is just saying, I want to push us to be able to verify as many prescriptions as possible as fast as we can in an hour. And I'm thinking, that's ridiculous. And that's not medicine. Like you're trying to make this into something that it is not, because you don't comprehend what we're trying to do here for people. And so I do think that there has to be a standard, and there has to be something related to, you have X number of pharmacists, X number of technicians. This is the threshold. Like they can handle these many RXs or these many vaccines or these many tasks or duties. And once it goes over that level, there has to be a next step that happens. And there has to be some level of oversight inside of that as well. I look like I'm freezing on my screen, but I guess regardless, there has to be a level of oversight and a level of auditing to make sure those things are occurring and to make sure people are being held accountable. Those are my 2 cents, but I'd like to hear from you guys. Like, what are other if we get something to change tomorrow, something that could be rapidly altered, what are your guys' thoughts on that suggestion and others you may have?
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider is, like you said, right now it's really like a volume and a numbers game, right? In order to stay profitable, you have to just increase volume. But that's where you have to start thinking outside the box, and where things like herbalism and functional medicine come into play, because most of the independent pharmacies that are still successful in today's world, this kind of ties into another topic that I wanted to bring up today and talk about. Was I was just in Nashville at the Functional Pharmacy Symposium this weekend, and we had Easton Bryant, who runs North Century Pharmacy down in Kentucky, little tiny independent pharmacy in the middle of nowhere. And his store is currently doing an insane amount of business through supplement sales online, as well as now rolling out new wellness programs that are actually getting to the root cause of people's conditions. And so this is the future of pharmacy, right? And again, if these chain pharmacies were smart, they would see this and they would also start figuring out ways to implement a functional medicine and herbalist approach in their existing business models, right? And actually, still, yes, like you have to attack it from both ways. So you need to staff the pharmacies, appropriately. And if you're not able to staff them, here's actually, if I take this like all the way back to the beginning, the one thing that they need to do is pay professional recruiters to recruit pharmacy technicians. That's it. Like, mic drop on the whole thing, because any pharmacy manager will tell you 99% of their job over the last year has been trying to staff their pharmacy, which is absurd, right? The pharmacy manager should be there overseeing the pharmacy operations and trying to like hire technicians whenever they're not paid enough, the abuse that they have to put up with from the working conditions and patients that are upset over things that are completely outside of their control. You can't do it. Like, you cannot get technicians to work in these stores anymore. So yeah, like you have to shift all of it. You have to increase the pay rates. You have to actually put recruiters in place to bring in these technicians and to get these stores properly staffed so that you can implement new revenue streams that are also going to get your patients better, right? So yes, like there's a little bit of like cannibalism in some of this, because you're going to have to lower your profits for a little while to get everything fully staffed and fully trained and start these new programs, which, yes, they might actually lower your prescription volume. But if you're doing it right, you are going to create lifelong customers in the sense that they trust their pharmacist and they're getting fabulous results and they want to keep coming back to this company and this person that is giving them physical, mental, emotional life, right? Like, it's such a big picture thing, and we're just way too focused on the profits for it to happen. So if I'm talking and someone from CVS or Walgreens or Rite Aid or Walmart or anywhere else is listening, like, you have to be a human being for a minute and actually think about, what can I personally do to change this, right? You've got pharmacists all over the country that are doing the one thing that they're capable of doing to force this conversation to happen. So all of the people in leadership of these companies need to have a reality check and say, wait a second, what the heck am I doing with my life in this job? And why am I leading this way? So yeah.
I completely agree. That's perfectly and passionately said. And there's an interesting element you added at the end there, is just when it comes to overall humanitarian like outlooks on our jobs, like how are we impacting the humans around us and making it more than just a job to create a paycheck. And I believe there's a large portion of pharmacists that went into their careers not just to make good money, and pharmacy technicians that are going into their careers not just have a stable job, but because they felt like they could help human beings, right? And I would love to see that reflected by the folks that had second quarter earnings that were up 10% and pulling in an additional $88.9 billion. I think that there's probably a little bit of skin in the game, and there's a little bit of meat on the bone for us to be able to actually take care of human beings and make sure they're being prioritized inside of our systems and live by some of the ethoses and monikers we want to put on our individual brands, so that we're actually doing things related to, look at that word, health. Let's start doing that. Marina, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think from like a practical standpoint, what we said before with immediate steps to be taken are probably extra feet on the ground. Probably technicians would be the most cost effective, but depending on the burden of the store, either having shifts, two pharmacists and having an overlap in their shift, something like that could be really easy to implement. And then from like a more future oriented perspective, definitely implementing technology, right? Because even when I go, let's say, to a doctor's office, and the most efficient ones have an app, they have a way that you quickly sign on without even talking to anybody. You just go to a kiosk and you use, a hand scanner. And so pharmacies can easily start doing those things, the automatic blood pressure or other sort of meters that we have. We can implement technology at every single step in the process when it comes to filling a prescription. And the pharmacist, again, needs to be there to educate, to counsel, to provide exactly the role that, using their top of their license, right? And doing only those things which cannot be done by anybody else. So that needs to happen as far as a reform. And, the value of somebody's role is really felt, unfortunately, when they're gone, right? So as soon as the walkout or, you lose that person or they quit, that's when you really can retrospectively look and see all that they did for that company. And so as long as there's people that are willing to put up with these conditions, as unsafe as they are, nothing will change. But now that we are speaking up, hopefully that we won't be just silenced and acquiesce. We will actually push the profession where it needs to go and advocate for those conditions. Because I don't think anybody just wants to strike and potentially, leave people without life-saving medications. I think it's come to the point where the future of the profession is more important than staying, for that one day. And also, if the pandemic taught us anything, it's that there are going to be issues, right, with manufacturing, with back orders, with all of these things. Now there's a whole epidemic with shortages of controlled substances. And so this is where we look at it more holistically with what else can we do to support these people's health, right? As a pharmacy, what else can we provide, and that could also bring our margins, right, and our profits up if we actually carry either products or education-based or consulting services in this setting that people are already coming to for health. And I see some of the comments about supplements not being the answer. Absolutely, they're not the only answer. There's problems with drug-only therapy. There's problems with supplement-only therapy if you're just using them as drugs, because they're not equivalent to drugs. And the whole allopathic system is trying to treat, the top level of this health pyramid, right? Like when something is really wrong, but that doesn't mean you stop doing all the foundational things. In order to survive, you need good quality air, water, environment. It all goes back to environment, which is why we're advocating for this in the first place.
Mhm.
We want that foundation to be supported.
No, I think that's perfectly said there. I think there's a lot of foundational elements that we have to be able to uproot because they've been set in the wrong stone. And so I'd love to hear, Lauren, some parting words from you on just, I just got a message from Bled, and just I asked her, like, what kind of things should we cover and talk about? And she really said that the biggest emphasis is bravery. We have a very brave group that they were willing to put themselves out there in an era of retaliation against individuals that are willing to do these types of things, right? And I think that can't be emphasized enough, is that they're like, a corporation and a business needs to run and make money. And so individuals that are harming that ability to run and make money are individuals that are anti those individual corporations, which I understand. There's a interesting impasse there, but I really am hopeful that we can take a page from some of the hospital organizations that have found ways to work with their nursing staffs during these strikes, and find a solution that works for everybody, and especially works for patient safety and long-term health of these individual providers. But Lauren, off to you.
Yeah, I think the thing I want to just kind of close with is that if you are a pharmacist that's watching this and you've been impacted by the walkouts in any way, shape, or form, or, struggling with this, or even technicians, I shared this on my LinkedIn as well, but I'm giving away a 90-minute version mini boot camp course right now, because I know there are pharmacists that are thinking to themselves, I think I'm going to need to leave my job. Like, I think this is getting to the point that I need to walk out or I need to just leave entirely. And I don't know what I want to do next. But if it's, any help whatsoever, I just want to be able to utilize the position that I'm in now to help other pharmacists on this path that, I was in retail stores in 2015 when I discovered functional medicine, and it completely changed my life. And I look back now to where I am today, and this little 90-minute course is basically taking everything that I've learned over all of those years and laying out that path forward for other people to be able to follow. And so, yeah, I just wanted to offer that. So if it's something that sounds interesting to you, and like I said, you're affected by these walkouts in any way, just comment, email me, info@fmpha.org, or just get a hold of me and I'll get you hooked up for that.
Love it. Marina, how about you?
Yeah, Lauren, you actually inspired me. And I have a similar masterclass that I did where I share exactly what steps I took. And then also looking back on my journey, what would speed up the journey to trying to really repurpose your pharmacy skills, right? Because we don't want to just give up this license that we worked hard for. It's how do you use the skills you already have, but you do something new with it. And that's really my purpose, is to share that with you. And my podcast talks about that. I interview so many pharmacists that started repurposing and using their pharmacy license in different innovative ways, holistic modalities, and other really cool things that they're doing. So check out the Holistic Pharmacy podcast, and then you can catch a replay of my masterclass by also emailing me, marina@rawfork.com, or I can link it in the comments below.
Amazing. Thank you both for your time. Thank you, everybody, for joining in, your comments and your passion for our profession. If you guys are able to, join our PH Ally. I think everything that Bled is doing is absolutely incredible. Being able to support her has been a wonderful thing over this last year and a half. And I think just continuing to advocate for individuals that push and drum for the profession and making sure that we're holding every group accountable is big. And so thank you guys so much for joining us today. Any questions, just let us know, get in the comments, and we'll see you guys next week. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.